Ancient and modern plus wealthy families plus entertainment industry plus variety shows plus metaphysics. Jiang Li, the legitimate daughter of the Marquis mansion, crossed over and dressed up as cannon fodder that killed herself shortly after entering the arena in the Ba Zongwen. Faced with the female lead of the Most Holy Mother in the book and the male lead of the boss configuration, Jiang Li immediately decided to stay away from these two intellectual disabilities and focus on promoting his family. What if the biological brother who plays the role of the infatuated second son is a complete playboy? Jiang Li directly packed people and sent them to the Transformers variety show. The wandering young master became famous overnight and eventually became the top actor. What should I do if my illegitimate younger brother dresses up with green tea all day and tries to win favor in front of the family? Jiang Li took the lead in becoming the king of exams, and green tea became a good student from then on, continuously pursuing undergraduate, master's, and doctoral studies. What should my cousin with autism do if he always locks himself in a dark room and tears his face? Jiang Li prescribed the right medicine, transforming melancholic wenching into the king of the temple of heaven, singing love songs with one hand and crying for millions of young girls. Under the governance of Jiang Li, the once tumultuous and declining wealthy Jiang family flourished and became brothers and sisters, eventually becoming the first aristocratic family in the capital. When Jiang Li first met that person, they had just finished chasing the uncontrollable herd of cows, and their faces were a pair of plateau reds even more brilliant than the sun in the sky. He extended his hand to her and introduced himself with a grin. "Hello, my name is Zhao Dainu." Jiang Li looked at the hand covered in mud and emitting an unknown odor and said, Cho refused, "Thank you." Encountering each other again, the other person transformed into the terrifying legitimate son of the Gu family, with a clear and beautiful moon and unparalleled nobility. He extended his hand again and said, "Hello, my name is Gu Yu. I heard that your family is short of a male host to sit in. Do you think I can handle it?" Everyone in the Jiang family jumped out and said, "No way. We don't need it." Novel keyword. Surprise. Her eldest daughter tore up the script of the wealthy family's cannon fodder without a pop-up window, shocked. My eldest daughter tore up the script for the cannon fodder of a wealthy family. Download the complete text. Amazing. Her eldest daughter tore apart the latest chapter of the rich family's cannon fodder script to read. Chapter 1. I am not interested in uncivilized men. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. I am not interested in uncivilized men. Jiang Li, I warn you not to think too late, otherwise I will bury the entire Jiang family with you. The angry voice of the man in his ear made Jiang Li, who was already dizzy, even more uncomfortable. After a burst of tinnitus, she struggled to open her eyes and finally saw the surrounding scenery clearly. The computer screen in front of her flashed with colorful special effects. Her hand was resting on the mouse in front of the table, and a man's questioning voice could be heard continuously from the earphones stuck on her head. Looking at the products of modern society around him, Jiang Li finally realized his current situation. She's wearing it again. Her name is Jiang Li, a female supporting character in a novel called The Top-Flowing Wife of a Paranoid CEO. After being manipulated by the plot to live a confused and unbearable life, her soul pierced into the Qi dynasty hundreds of years ago, becoming the eldest daughter of a prominent Marquis mansion. That was the happiest life she had ever lived. There, she broke free from the control of the plot, lived the life she wanted, and became the person she wanted to be. But just after she thought she could finally enjoy a free life as she pleased, she wore it again. Can't she still get rid of that ridiculous and sad fate? Hey, talk, don't pretend to be mute. You better tell me quickly where you hid Yin. In the earphone, the man's voice became increasingly excited, as if he could tear her apart through the void. Jiang Li's eyebrows and eyes sank. She recognized the voice of this person, Shang Xiaojing, the male lead of The Top-Tier Wife of a Paranoid CEO, a dictatorial, paranoid, and unreasonable CEO. The Yin he referred to was the female lead of this novel, Su Yin. And she is the brainless follower of the dominant male lead and the jealous lover of the silly and sweet female lead. The vicious female supporting figure who has been killed by heaven. It's reasonable to be a female supporting actress, but she is not even an important supporting role, but a cannon fodder purely serving the plot. As soon as he appeared on the stage, he kidnapped the female lead, angered the male lead, brought about a fatal accident, and even implicated the entire family in retaliation from the male lead. Thinking of that extremely painful life, Jiang Li's fierce anger between his eyebrows and eyes couldn't stop surging. After experiencing the colorful ancient life, she no longer wants to be a puppet manipulated by the plot. But now that she has her own consciousness, perhaps she has already gotten rid of the plot. Thinking of this, Jiang Li clenched his earphone and tentatively shouted, "Shang Xiaojing." The other party immediately sneered and said, "Jiang Li, don't you pretend to be mute, right? Answer my question, where is Su Yinwan?" After confirming that he didn't have the ecstatic mood of receiving a phone call from the male lead like in his previous life, Jiang Li's eyes turned pale, and he hung up the phone expressionlessly afterwards. Since she is no longer controlled by the plot, there is no need to waste her breath on him. She doesn't want to have any relationship with this brainless and vengeful male lead. The little attendant on the side saw Jiang Li's expression change after answering a phone call, and immediately stopped playing the game in his hand. He took off his headphones and angrily said, "Sister Li, is it that woman Su Yinwan is causing you trouble again? According to my opinion, you should tie up that slut and teach her a lesson. See if she dares to steal men from you in the future." Jiang Li's gaze shifted to the boy next to him. After a few seconds of contemplation, she gradually extracted information about the boy from the already blurry memory. Her first younger brother Xiang Hao. In the book, he portrays himself as an extremely rebellious wealthy heiress. After her father's early death, she disregarded her mother's control and skipped school all day to hang out with a group of street bullies. After meeting the handsome male lead at a banquet, I fell in love with him uncontrollably. But at that time, Shang Xiaojing had already established an intricate relationship with the female lead Su Yinwan. In order to win over Shang Xiaojing, she was very upset about the female lead. So after the female protagonist deliberately played the game of go missing with the male protagonist, Shang Xiaojing called and directly demanded someone from her. This leads to the opening scene. In the book, she, who was already jealous of the female lead, and was criticized by the male lead on the phone, immediately adopted Xiang Hao's opinion and kidnapped Su Yinwan. Before he could teach anyone a lesson, the male protagonist rushed over to save the beauty, but she was actually scolded by the male protagonist's people. Afterwards, along with the entire Jiang family, they became the enemy of Shang Xiaojing, gradually being excluded by the aristocratic families in the capital, and eventually embarked on the path of bankruptcy and bankruptcy. But at this moment, Jiang Li slowly stood up from the chair and lifted his hand to stroke the wrinkles on his skirt. "No need, I'm not interested in those uncivilized men." Xiang Hao. He couldn't believe his ears. "Li Jie doesn't like that man surnamed Shang, can't she? How come you lose interest in him after playing a game?" As his gaze shifted back to the girl in front of him, Xiang Hao felt that there might also be something wrong with his eyes. Otherwise, why did he suddenly feel that the Li sister in front of him was somewhat different from her a minute ago? A minute ago, she was holding the mouse and shouting to kill. 1 minute later, Jiang Li, who stood in front of him, had an inviolable aura on his body, and his eyes were also filled with an indifferent light. A mature and experienced light that does not belong to her age. It's like the place where she's standing right now is not the smoky internet cafe, but rather the school field where she's charging into battle. And she is the commander-in-chief of the troops and generals. With his mind returning, Xiang Hao swallowed his saliva and said, Li, what's wrong with you? Even if that woman Su Yinwan makes you angry again, you can't really make yourself angry. Jiang Li looked at him. As expected, due to the power of the plot, her little follower is still inseparable from Su Yinwan. It's pointless to explain to him more. So she raised her hand and lightly patted the other person's shoulder. Xiang Hao, study hard and strive to be a cultured, polite, law-abiding person who can serve the country. I won't be with you anymore. I have to go home. By the way, you should go back early too, don't let your parents worry. After speaking, she walked out of the internet cafe without looking back, leaving Xiang Hao alone in the esports chair dumbfounded. What is the situation? Does Jiang Li, who is addicted to skipping classes every day, encourage him to study hard and serve the country? Jiang Li, who often runs away from home, actually wants to take the initiative to go home today and advise him not to let his parents worry. Is he crazy or is this world crazy? As soon as he walked out of the internet cafe, his gaze suddenly turned bright, and the intense sunlight made Jiang Li squint. At this moment, the capital has entered early summer, with the sun shining and the breeze not dry, everything is just right. She also came back just right. After raising his hand to stop a car, Jiang Li stroked his skirt and sat in. Originally, she wanted to go home directly, but when she saw herself wearing a non-mainstream outfit in the rearview mirror, Jiang Li fell into silence. Hello master, could you please go to the nearest hair salon? Thank you. The driver was somewhat surprised. This pink-haired little girl looks so polite in such a society. He immediately switched to a kind smile and said, "All right, girl, fasten your seatbelt. Let's go." Recommend the completed text, quick wearing boss, she's beautiful and seductive, free for members. Breaking through the misfortune water quickly. Blackened by the sick male lead of the scum queen, full text for free. A hot new article is here. The new book has just been released, please leave more comments and check in, so that we can climb the list and let more people see us. Rolling around seeking recommendation tickets and monthly passes, urgent need for feeding ahem. Also welcome to read the completed text next door, quick wearing boss, she's beautiful and seductive, breaking through the misfortune water quickly. Blackened by the sick and delicate male lead of the scum queen, they are all very fat. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. What kind of family do they belong to? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. What kind of family do they belong to? On the top floor of the financial building, a dark cloud gathered between the eyebrows of Shang Xiaojing, who had hung up his phone. How dare Jiang Li hang up his phone? It seems that Su Yinwan's disappearance is related to her inability to escape. Putting down his phone, he raised his hand and pressed the summoning bell next to the table. At the moment the bell rang, the office door was pushed open and a man in a suit and leather shoes walked in. Is there any news? Shang Xiaojing's tone was a bit cold. The assistant lowered her head and said, Miss Su still has no news at the moment, but my subordinates have found out that Miss Su's last appearance before her disappearance was at the Jiang family's young master Jiang Yan's banquet. Upon hearing this, the darkness on Shang Xiaojing's face deepened once again. A Jiang Li, a Jiang Yan, what exactly does this brother and sister of the Jiang family want to do? Perhaps something came to mind, and Shang Xiaojing's fingertips lightly tapped on the desktop. If I remember correctly, today should be the day when Jiang Yan and that Miss Jiao's family got engaged, right? The assistant nodded and said, yes, Mr. Shang. Well, since that's the case, let's also give Mr. Jiang a small gift. After changing his attire all over his body, Jiang Li finally set off back to the Jiang family. Looking at the red-roofed villa hidden by the green trees in front of her, she couldn't help but feel a little emotional. Having calmed down, Jiang Li walked forward and rang the doorbell. After hearing the commotion, a figure slowly walked out of the nearby guard room and stared at the girl at the door for a long time before widening their eyes and saying, Miss, Mississippi. Are you Mississippi? At this moment, Jiang Li also recognized the person in front of her. Uncle Jiang, her father's person, but for some reason, he has now become a security guard. But she didn't ask too much, just nodded calmly and said, Uncle Jiang, it's me. Jiang Yi was even more surprised. Where does the girl in front of him have any memory of her? Her black and shiny hair was spread out like silk behind her head, and her pure face was like a bright moon, so beautiful that it was somewhat distorted. Especially those apricot eyes, clear yet exuding a hint of calm light that seems to have been washed away by time, make people feel inexplicably at ease. The eye-catching pink hair is gone, the heavy makeup on the face is also gone, and the strange and various floral dresses are also gone. The whole person is like a young lady from a scholarly family who emerged from television, noble and elegant. No, their young lady is already a noble daughter. Without much thought, Jiang Li quickly opened the door and excitedly welcomed the person in. "Miss, you have finally returned home. You don't know, the months you have been running away from home have made Madam very worried, and there is also the young master." Jiang Li's footsteps paused, and the image of an unkempt and promiscuous person suddenly came to mind. So she instinctively asked, "What's wrong with Jiang Yan?" Jiang Yi let out a long sigh and said, "This matter is a long story. You'd better hurry to the front hall to see the situation first." At this time, the front hall was surrounded by people in 3 circles and 3 circles outside. Mrs. Chiao, standing in the center, hugged her daughter and glared angrily at the beautiful woman in front of her. "Madam Jiang, you must give us an explanation today. The matter of Jiang Yan's escape from marriage cannot be settled like this. Your Jiang family cannot bully us ordinary people on the basis of their own great cause." "Yeah, that's right. Our Chiao family is not easy to bully either. Calling us over here is just to make a fool of ourselves, right? This thing can never go through like this." Seeing the emotions of the Chiao family getting more and more excited, Mrs. Jiang Lin Monru's face turned white and white. She quickly explained, "It's not a runaway marriage. My son is not that kind of person. Mother-in-law, don't worry, this marriage is definitely a miscarriage." "Oh, math. Then you should let Jiang Yan come out. I can't let my daughter be alone here and make everyone laugh, can I?" Speaking, Mrs. Chiao quickly gave her daughter beside her a glance, and Xiao Shuang immediately began to cry in a low, understanding voice. Lin Monru anxiously pinched the wine glass in her hand, wanting to say something to comfort her future daughter. Law, but couldn't say it. Qin's mother on the side quickly pulled the person aside when she saw the situation. "Madam, this won't work. You need to find a way to appease the Chiao family. You can't let these people sit around watching jokes, and it will damage the reputation of the Jiang family again." Lin Monru nodded in agreement and then walked up to Mrs. Chiao. Her voice softened and she said, "Mother-in-law, today's matter was not carefully considered by me. We can compensate for your losses. Please do not disclose this matter to the public, so as not to cause a bad scene between the 2 families in the end." Mrs. Chiao snorted, "Compensation? Of course you want compensation. My daughter has suffered such a great deal of injustice. It's not too much to demand a 5% stake in your Jiang group, is it?" Lin Monru's face turned pale. She didn't expect Mrs. Chiao to speak so loudly, arguing for shares as soon as she came up. But it was their mistake to do this, so she shouldn't have publicly claimed that the engagement banquet between the Jiang and Chiao families was held as scheduled when Jiang Yan went missing. But how can Xiao Shuang be said to be the future daughter-in-law of the Jiang family? What's the point of dividing her 5% stake? Biting her teeth, Lin Monru was about to speak up and agree when suddenly a clear female voice came in from outside the door, "No, I don't agree to split the shares." Everyone followed the sound and saw that the originally closed door had been pushed open at some point, and a graceful girl was standing against the light. Her figure was not tall, and even a bit thin and weak, but there was an inexplicably strong aura emanating from her surroundings, making the originally noisy hall suddenly quiet. After being stunned for a moment, Lin Monru walked forward in surprise and joy. "Li. Is that you? How did you come back?" It's not that Lin Monru doesn't recognize it, but that the girl in front of her has changed so much that she dare not recognize it. No one around recognized the identity of this girl, especially Mrs. Chiao, who was interrupted by Wu Gu. She vented all her anger on this yellow-haired girl. Who are you? What's a child interrupting when adults talk? This is between me and Mrs. Jiang. Why do you say that if you don't agree to split the shares, then you won't split them? Jiang Li's eyes were filled with a cold light, not excited by Mrs. Chiao's roar, but calmly surveyed the person from beginning to end. For some reason, Mrs. Chiao's back suddenly felt a little cold as she was gazed at, but she immediately regained her composure when she realized that she was also an elder. May I ask you something? Why is this girl so impolite? Jiang Li's voice was indifferent and he said, Who are you? Why do you have to come back to me if you ask me? Those who come up without reporting their family background and speak loudly will be beaten out by thugs in the Marquis mansion. It was precisely because of her modern mother's soft nature that she was completely manipulated. Perhaps feeling that her daughter was too abnormal, Lin Monru quickly spoke up and said, Li, this is your brother's future mother.in.law, not anyone else. You need to be polite. Jiang Li's expression remained unchanged. What kind of in-laws are you from? In my opinion, my mother should have kicked out this stranger who caused trouble. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Madam, the young master has been missing for over half a month. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Madam, the young master has been missing for over half a month. Madam Chiao was originally still angry at the attitude of the little girl who came from an unknown source. When she heard Lin Monru's words, her face couldn't help but change. She is actually Jiang Li, the eldest daughter of the Jiang family. Could Jiang Li had seen her before, wearing heavy makeup all day long and having an explosive personality? How could she have such a snowy and elegant appearance like now, and speak confidently? Surprised, but soon she straightened her back and continued to speak with a strange tone. Jiang Li, this is between your mother and me. It's not your turn to intervene as a little girl. Why don't you go back to your own room and do what you need to do? Jiang Li smiled lightly and grabbed his mother who wanted to speak. Mrs. Chiao, this is your mistake. Although I am a younger generation, at least I am also the eldest daughter of the Jiang family. My father passed away early, so the burden of this family naturally belongs to me. Now that outsiders have set their sights on our family, as a member of the Jiang family, how can I sit idly by? I believe everyone present here is even more aware of the principle of both prosperity and loss than a younger generation like me. Upon hearing these words, everyone nodded in agreement. But at the same time, he was also shocked by the changes in Jiang Li. They have long heard of the name of this young lady. She has been causing trouble for the Jiang family since middle school, and even dropped out of high school, spending all day with a group of indecisive people. In the end, he was ordered by Mr. Jiang to attend a wild chicken university, which can be considered as a temporary lull. But during this period, Mr. Jiang returned to his hometown to worship his ancestors, and this ancestor became even more uncontrollable, even taking up the idea of the merchant's grandfather. Being stubborn and shameless in various occasions, pestering others and causing them to run away from home, has almost ruined the reputation of the entire Jiang family in the capital. I didn't expect this little ancestor to change his usual routine today. Not only did he dress appropriately and generously, but he suddenly became so beautiful, and even began to think about his family. On the contrary, Mrs. Chiao has somewhat lost her elder demeanor. That's right, Mrs. Chiao. Why are you having a grudge against a younger generation? No matter how much they say they are also Miss Jiang from the Jiang family, it's right to protect your mother, isn't it? Yeah, not to mention that you wanted shares right from the beginning. The shares of Jiangshi Group are difficult to obtain in the market now, so it's a bit excessive for you to do so. Miss Jiang is right. As someone from the Jiang family, we naturally need to consider the interests of the Jiang family. Listening to the discussions of the people around her, Mrs. Chiao's face turned white, and then she hugged her daughter and pretended to be pitiful. So what do you say? My daughter was already very aggrieved in this marriage, and you all know the character of Jiang Li. As a playboy, my daughter suffered a lot of injustice and ridicule, forced herself to attend the engagement banquet, and ended up being runaway. What should I do to compensate her? Since that's the case, then let's cancel this marriage, Jiang Li said. What? The two families both exclaimed in shock. Jiang Li's light and floating words caused a great commotion. Even Lin Manru hurriedly stopped her and said, Li, this marriage cannot be terminated. It was arranged by your grandfather, and you are not unaware of your brother's temperament. Miss Chiao is already considered a good match. It's not that she doesn't want to find a better in-laws for her son, but looking at the entire capital, no one except the Chiao family is willing to marry their daughter into their family. Jiang Li's gaze fell on Xiao Shuang, who was leaning against Mrs. Chiao and sobbing softly. Good match. Not necessarily. In the past life, the entire Jiang family began to decline from the moment Xiao Shuang married in. Jiang Yan was forced to marry someone he didn't like and drank heavily all day long, completely treating the female lead Su Yinwan as an unattainable white moonlight. In the end, he was retaliated by Shang Xiaojing and embarked on a path of no return. And her mother, in order to compensate for being neglected by Xiao Shuang, sent money after money to the Qiao family, filling this bottomless hole without any bottom line, and in the end, she was turned around and ruined by the Qiao family who held shares. Xiao Shuang went even further, not only relying on her own grievances to hold on to her mother everywhere, but also colluding with outsiders and taking advantage of the Jiang family's crisis to run away with money, completely pushing the whole family into the abyss. She would never let someone with such unethical conduct enter the door of the Jiang family. Thinking of this, Jiang Li deliberately raised his volume and said, Mother, we have done our utmost kindness to the Qiao family. If it weren't for Grandpa, they would have gone bankrupt long ago and couldn't even stay in the capital. Since my brother is unwilling to do this marriage, they are also unwilling. It's better to let it go. We can't just let it go. Xiao Fu's popular chest trembled as he spoke. Why do you want to tie this marriage as soon as you say it's over, or scatter it as soon as you say it's over? In that case, where will Frost's face go, and where will our Qiao family's face go? Jiang Li snorted lightly and said, It's already the 21st century. Does a family's face still need to be maintained through a marriage? If your Qiao family is well behaved and upright, their face will naturally appear without relying on anything. You. Mrs. Chiao's choked face turned blue and white, but she was also muttering in her heart. When did Jiang Li become so eloquent? Where did a person who didn't even get into college come from these crooked truths? But the Qiao family is not someone who eats dry food either. Today, they seem to have no intention of ending this matter and are arguing for an explanation from the Jiang family. Otherwise, everyone will know about the trouble and they will have no face in the capital. Qin Mama on the side was also extremely anxious, going to pull Jiang Li and persuading Lin Manru. Madam, the young master has been missing for half a month and we couldn't find anyone. If we withdraw at this time, what if the old master comes back and blames you? Mrs. Chiao's ears were sharp when she heard these words, and she jumped up and shouted, Okay, I'll tell you why you insist on catching my Frost. It turns out Jiang Yan has gone missing. Oh, the groom's official has long disappeared. If you don't come and notify us, it's okay. You deliberately tricked such a large group of people into attending the engagement banquet. Why, is that how your Jiang family works? At this moment, the guests also turned their heads and accused the Jiang family of immorality. Lin Manru was so anxious that her eyes turned red, but she didn't know how to deal with so many emotionally excited people. Jiang Li slowly walked up to Mrs. Chiao and looked at her calmly, saying calmly, Jiang Yan is not missing. Madame Chiao laughed angrily and said, Not missing. No one knows that Jiang Yan is just a jerk. He spends his days outside indulging in extravagance and causing trouble. Missing someone will happen sooner or later. What would I say if I brought him back? Mrs. Chiao doesn't believe it at all. In their circle, going missing is equivalent to either being kidnapped or being privately resolved by the Chiao family. Moreover, Jiang Yan has indeed not shown his face in public for a long time, so it is estimated that he has been unlucky for a long time. It took the Jiang family over half a month to find anyone, but she can find a little girl in just one day. Moreover, their siblings are still notorious for their discord. So without hesitation, she spoke harshly and said, "Okay, if you can find Jiang Yan today, I will unconditionally agree to divorce." End of this chapter. Chapter 4. How can she tell fortune? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. How can she tell fortune? As soon as the words were spoken, Mrs. Chiao regretted it a bit. Can Jiang Yan find it back? Also, she agreed that the purpose of this marriage was originally to gain some benefits from the Jiang family. Otherwise, who would be willing to marry her daughter to such an unconventional person? If she withdraws unconditionally, how can she still profit from it? However, before Mrs. Chiao could change her tone, Jiang Li in front of her had already raised her phone, and what was spreading inside was her harsh words just now in a state of urgency. "Okay, if you can find Jiang Yan today, I will unconditionally agree to divorce." Jiang Li looked at her with a faint smile on his lips and said, "Madam Chiao, this is physical evidence, and there are many witnesses around. You can't go back then." Xiao Fu's face turned white and he whispered, "Let's find the person first." Now she prays that the Jiang Yan people should be gone. This way, her daughter doesn't have to marry over, and she can also earn some shares to be with her. Jiang Li took back his phone and turned to pull his mother Lin Monru aside. Lin Monru was still immersed in the huge transformation of her daughter's temperament and didn't calm down. She was stunned for a long time before saying, "Do you really have a way to find your brother back?" Jiang Yan's disappearance occurred more than half a month ago. That night, she had just revealed to him about the marriage between the Jiang and Xiao families, but he got angry on the spot and disappeared without a trace overnight. She knew that the child's temper had always been like this, so she didn't care about him. As long as his consumption records were still there, she could trace the whereabouts of her son. Who knew that just a few days ago, there was no movement on his card, and upon inquiry, there was no movement either. She was frightened and quickly mobilized the power of the Jiang family to investigate, but so far there has been no whereabouts. As the engagement banquet between the two families approached, Lin Monru bravely hosted it, fearing that any mistakes would displease the old man and ruin the marriage. Who would have thought it would still be ruined now? Jiang Li let out a and then took her mother's hand. For some reason, Lin Monru, who was still immersed in anxiety, suddenly calmed down due to her sound and handshake. Because she felt an inexplicable and reassuring power in her daughter. But before Lin Monru could breathe a sigh of relief, she heard a sentence that puzzled her. "Please report Jiang Yan's birthday to me with the exact time." Lin Monru looked puzzled and said, "Why does your brother need this kind of thing?" Jiang Li couldn't explain clearly for a while. After entering the Qi dynasty, at a young age when he had just learned how to read and read, he was taken in by the current national teacher as a disciple of the closed door and learned a whole set of mystical skills. Although her skills have not yet reached the level of her master's ability to distinguish yin and yang and manipulate qi, she is still able to do fortune-telling and position manipulation. In the novel, Jiang Yan is the #1 follower of the female protagonist. Although the ending is tragic, her fate is not short and she will not easily end up. And there is indeed a scene in her memory where Jiang Yan deliberately went missing in order to escape marriage, but in her past life, she didn't care about her family's affairs, so she knew very little about the development of this plot. But as of now, finding Jiang Yan back and withdrawing from this marriage is the best solution. "Mother, just tell me, I have a solution, don't worry." Jiang Li's tone was gentle, but with an inexplicable and steady force, it made people feel comfortable to listen to. Looking at the determination in her eyes, Lin Monru slowly dispelled her doubts. The situation has become so chaotic, why don't we just treat the dead horse as a living horse doctor? As long as we can find Jiang Yan back, it's okay. After receiving Jiang Yan's birth date and 8 characters, Jiang Li explained a few more words and went straight out of the door. This series of nagging actions from gods and gods has made Mrs. Chiao look more contemptuous than ever. What is a little girl pretending to be a fortune teller doing here? Is that how your Jiang family educates their children? Lin Monru's face couldn't help but look unpleasant upon hearing these words, but when she thought of what Jiang Li had said before leaving, she clenched her fists and turned to entertain the guests with a friendly expression. Mrs. Chiao punched the cotton and her teeth itched with anger. Due to the presence of so many people, she couldn't keep criticizing Lin Monru, who was serving guests, and could only sit aside with a full stomach full of anger. Liyuan Hotel. Just as the front desk finished answering a phone call, they looked up and saw a guest approaching the door. The girl looked young, but her temperament was extraordinary. She had black hair, red lips, apricot eyes, and peach cheeks, like a classical beauty emerging from meticulous painting. Her graceful demeanor exuded elegance and composure. Especially those eyes, they still held a steady and wise light that did not belong to her age. The girl didn't take a step at a time like the others, but walked straight to the counter and gave her a light smile. "Hello, my name is Jiang Li and I'm here to find someone." The sound overflowing from those red lips was as pleasant as a trickle of water. The front desk couldn't help but smile and politely asked, "Hello miss, could you please show me your identification? I'm not sure who you're looking for." Thinking that Jiang Yan probably wouldn't use his identity information to register, Jiang Li took out his photo from his phone and showed it to the front desk along with his identification. "I'm looking for this person, he should be with a woman. She has calculated Jiang Yan's fortune for today, and the chart shows that he is currently in a place where water and wood blend, with a rough orientation around here. And the original location of this Liyuan Hotel was by the mountains and by the water, with excellent feng shui. In recent years, it has been developing rapidly among a group of hotels in the capital. And she vaguely remembers that in her previous life, the Jiang family was manipulated like that by the Chiao family, also because Jiang Yan caused a scandal on the day of engagement. The video of rolling sheets with other women was spread to the engagement banquet. The front desk lady originally smiled politely, but her expression froze when she saw the photo, and she immediately pushed Jiang Li's belongings over. "Sorry, I haven't seen this person before." Jiang Li caught a glimpse of her reaction and immediately guessed that she might have been bribed by Jiang Yan in advance. Her brother is a jerk, but he still has a lot of ulterior motives. Jiang Li was not in a hurry either. He turned around and walked to the sofa, stroking his skirt and sitting down. His legs naturally overlapped, and he remained calm and composed. "You should have guessed that the identities of me and the person I am looking for are not easy. This matter is not something you can afford. It's better to call your manager over." The front desk's face turned white, and a fleeting memory flashed in my mind of those wealthy housewives who were seen on TV trying to capture evidence of their husband's infidelity, and even ended up ruining the hotel. This girl is right. Her small front desk cannot withstand these wealthy people. So I quickly called and invited the manager over. The manager also guessed the general situation from the words at the front desk and did not give any accurate words. Instead, he turned around and called for several waiters, who were brewing coffee and bringing desserts. Obviously, this is not the first time he has dealt with the wealthy lady who came to arrest the adultery. This kind of thing cannot offend either party. After finally sitting down, the manager smiled apologetically and said, "I'm sorry, madam. As you know, our hotel operators need to protect the privacy of guests. You can come up and ask us for the guest's room number and room card, which is difficult for us to handle." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Personally Catching Traitors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Personally catching traitors. At the moment of seeing Jiang Li, the manager was somewhat surprised. Because she is so beautiful and young, completely different from the rich ladies who used to come to catch adultery. How could her husband bear to let this beautiful wife at home come out and steal food? It's simply a waste. With a sigh of relief, the manager still said something painless. This was all to Jiang Li's surprise. She calmly picked up the coffee handed by the waiter and took a few sips. The slightly drooping movement of the head is particularly elegant, paired with the appropriate intensity of the facial features, especially pleasing to the eye. After putting down the cups and cups, she lifted her eyes and smiled as she met the manager's gaze. Manager Fang, have you been in this industry for over a decade? You should have been doing well recently. The manager had no idea that Jiang Li would suddenly change the topic. In a moment of confusion, she didn't even suspect how she knew she had been in this industry for more than 10 years. She instinctively nodded. However, what surprised him even more was her next words: Manager Fang's career is good. Although he suffered from being tricked by villains in the early years, fortunately he met a nobleman and took advantage of the trend to open this hotel. But Manager Fang was completely stunned. How did she know about her past experiences? Did she already investigate her past before coming? But it shouldn't be. He has been working hard abroad before, and very few people know about his experience. Even if this lady has great abilities, she cannot extend her hand so long. After seeing his surprised expression, Jiang Li smiled and placed his hands on his knees. Sorry, Manager Fang. It was my rudeness. I once learned some mystical techniques from an expert and happened to be able to deduce some of others' life paths. Upon hearing this, Manager Fang breathed a sigh of relief, but became even more puzzled. To be honest, madam, I also quite believe in these things as a person. However, fortune-telling usually requires knowing the other person's birth date and 8 characters first. Is it difficult? Jiang Li explained, having a detailed birth date and 8 characters is certainly better, but a person's destiny can also be reflected in their facial features. Manager Fang suddenly realized that she had just been observing her face without speaking. Although this cannot rule out the fact that she may have investigated herself before, for some reason, Manager Fang always felt that the lady in front of her did not seem like that kind of person. Because he saw a sense of openness and righteousness in her eyes. And if she really investigates herself, she can use those as threats instead of talking to herself with a humble attitude here. So he asked curiously again, I don't know what you mean by, but just now. Jiang Li smiled slightly and said, however, I see that Manager Fang's impression is gloomy. It seems that he has recently encountered some difficult matters. Your destiny carries the evil spirit of a lone phoenix, and the main marriage is not going well. I think this difficult matter should have happened to your wife. Manager Fang's doubts were completely dispelled after Jiang Li finished speaking. He has been arguing with his wife for days and nights recently. As it is a family scandal, he has not publicized it to anyone. Even if this lady has a tough wrist, it is impossible to investigate this matter. However, it's not over yet. Jiang Li stroked her skirt and got up from the sofa. After walking over to him, she leaned down and whispered to him. If you go home now, maybe you can still hold on to your wife's leverage. After all, the affair without evidence is like empty talk. Manager Fang was even more shocked, but at the same time, he dared not underestimate this young lady. He has recently suspected that his wife has been cheating on him, but he is struggling with no evidence to expose the situation. Since this young girl is so talented, why not go back and take a gamble? But before he could leave on the pretext, the other party grabbed him again, with a mysterious smile on his lips. Manager Fang, have you forgotten something? Since you also believe in these mystical teachings, I believe you should know that this process of fortune-telling is equivalent to the exchange of energy between 2 parties. I have already revealed the secret to you. If you don't provide something to compensate for it, you may encounter trouble in the future. Manager Fang still understands this truth. Those fortune-tellers often demand that the other party pay a certain amount of divination money, on the one hand to make a living, but more importantly, to offset this loss of luck with money. They are particularly particular about luck when doing business, and he dare not joke about it. So Manager Fong took away the waiter and handed his universal room card to Jiang Li, gritting his teeth and saying, "I can only help madam with this matter here. Please, madam, for the sake of our difficult business, don't make too much noise." Jiang Li nodded and said, "This is nature, I am not someone without propriety. And don't worry too much, Manager Fong. You will get the result you want." Manager Fong repeatedly thanked him and then quickly drove home. This series of operations has fooled the front desk. Their manager is known as the most difficult person to deal with, not because he has a tough temper, on the contrary, he is an extremely smooth person. Those red and white-faced people are useless to him, so all the ladies who came to catch the traitors before have been defeated without exception. How did this girl persuade their manager to take out her room card in just 10 minutes? But this is not something she should gossip about. After all, Manager Fong has let go, and she can only truthfully tell Jiang Li the room number of that person. After thanking Jiang Li, he got on the elevator and went straight to the door of room 1307. She expressionlessly opened the door with a universal card and walked in. There is a lot of noise inside, and there is also harsh music playing on the TV. But as if she couldn't see or hear anything, she walked to the only window with a bright light and sat down, then picked up a book on the table and started reading. The man on the big bed was kissing the woman under him with reluctance. The woman's coat has been untied, and she is now passionately holding onto the man's neck, moaning and coquettishly calling out his name. "Yen Gu. Yen Gu, please be gentle." The woman lifted her head and was about to take off her obstructing clothes when Yu Guang suddenly caught a glimpse of Jiang Li sitting by the window. She widened her eyes in shock and screamed the next second. "Ah!" Jiang Yen successfully lost interest in this shout and frowned as he looked at the woman below him. "What's wrong?" Qin Xiaoxiao's face turned pale as she reached out her hand, trembling as she pointed towards the woman who suddenly appeared in the room. "Yes, there are ghosts." Jiang Yan's eyebrows furrowed even deeper. Where did the ghosts come from during the day? However, when he got up and turned around, he also caught a glimpse of the figure by the window. After subconsciously cursing, "Fuck," he successfully met the female ghost with 4 eyes. In just an instant, he recognized the newcomer and angrily grabbed a pillow and threw it over. "Fuck. How the fuck did you get in here? The new book guide is here. 1. It is forbidden to accuse the book. Roast is okay. Don't abuse. Every character has its own meaning too. It is prohibited to mention other authors and works in the comments section, as they will be deleted. 3. Malicious attacks are prohibited as they may be blocked by administrators. 4. New books are not easy, so please give more recommended and monthly tickets, be more active, and leave more comments. Only then can Snow and Snow have the motivation to update. 5. Update 2 chapters at midnight every day, add 1 chapter for every 50 monthly passes accumulated, reward 5,000 book coins or more with 1 chapter added, and add 1 chapter to the top 10 new book list. 6. Welcome to the concluding article of Shui Shui, right next door, end of this chapter. Chapter 6. Jiang Li, are you fucking crazy? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Jiang Li, are you fucking crazy? The pillow rubbed against Jiang Li's shoulder and landed on the floor behind him. Jiang Li's gaze slowly moved away from the page in his hand, and after glancing at Jiang Yan, who was full of anger, he stopped on the woman on the bed and couldn't help but feel a little deeper. The woman who completely ruined Jiang Yan's reputation is here. In her past life, it was the video of her sleeping with Jiang Yan that was uploaded to the phones of the guests who came to the banquet today, which led the Qiao family to completely grasp their grip and constantly threaten them in the future, gradually squeezing the entire Jiang family dry. She was originally wondering who had such great abilities, but now everything seems to make sense. At this moment, Qin Xiaoxiao was still in a state of shock and uncertainty, and was being scrutinized by this woman of unknown origin, which made her already naked even more ashamed and embarrassed. She instinctively pulled the blanket to cover her body, and then her brain quickly started running. This woman's aura is so strong, and Jiang Yan's reaction is so strong. She shouldn't be the Miss Chiao who is engaged to Jiang Yan, right? At this thought, a faint light flashed in Qin Xiaoxiao's eyes, and then he hid directly behind Jiang Yan, crying and crying. Miss Chiao, don't misunderstand. Yan and I were just momentarily confused. I didn't mean to ruin your relationship, you must believe me. I know today is your engagement day, and I'm also trying to persuade Yan Gu to come, but... Qin Xiaoxiao cried and lifted her eyelids to observe Jiang Li's reaction. But the other party not only showed no signs of anger, but also continued to look at her with a pair of eyes that could not detect any emotional fluctuations. Now, Qin Xiaoxiao finally felt a bit flustered. Is this so? Called Miss Chiao a ruthless character? But didn't that person say she was just a brainless paper tiger? Upon hearing this, Jiang Yan stood up irritably and said, What Miss Chiao? She's my sister, Jiang Li. Qin Xiaoxiao instantly widened her eyes and said, What? Mississippi. How could it be? As soon as the words fell, Jiang Yan seemed to finally realize something was wrong. He hesitated as he lifted his pants before suddenly turning on the room light. With a loud bang, the dim room was finally lit up, and he finally saw the woman who was rubbing his ears and hair against him. Qin Xiaoxiao. Why is it you? He is not Jiang Li. By the window finally closed the book in his hand, and his gaze fell back on Jiang Yan. The genes of the Jiang family have always been very good, and Jiang Yan has also blended the strengths of their parents very well. Not only is their figure perfect and impeccable, but even that face is a disaster to the country and the people. With thin lips and fair skin, and a face as carved as a pen, she happened to have a romantic peach blossom eye. Even if she didn't make any deliberate expression, she could already make all young girls cover their mouths and scream. Except for her. In her eyes, at this moment, Jiang Yan, who was naked in his upper body and didn't have time to pull up his pants, was a completely aimless jerk. After being intimate with a stranger for a while, I realized that she was not my beloved. If placed in Daki, it would become a joke for the entire family and be harshly punctured by historians. So, without concealing the mockery in her eyes, she smiled inexplicably and said, Why, is this the only way to sober up? Jiang Yan impatiently grabbed a handful of her hair, turned her face black several times in place, and then glared fiercely at Qin Xiaoxiao, Our accounts will be calculated later. Then he turned around and continued to stare at Jiang Li, What are you doing here? This is not where you should be, hurry up. Let me go, you can come back with me. Jiang Yan laughed angrily and said, I have gone through 1,000 hardships to run out. Why should I go back with you? That's not right. He only then realized that something was wrong with his younger sister, and raised his eyebrows to scrutinize the person from beginning to end, sarcastically saying, Are you really Jiang Li? What about your pink hair? What about your ugly dress? Shouldn't it be a deliberate change of style to win the favor of Shang Xiaojing? In his impression, his younger sister has never been a fuel-efficient lamp. I have had a temper since I was young, and I am quite unreasonable. As he grew up, he became even more stubborn and couldn't do it. He just hung out with a group of unscrupulous people all day and even fell in love with the guy surnamed Shang. He stubbornly pestered them, making him almost ridiculed by the people in the circle. Jiang Li didn't want to waste too much time with him, so he picked up his phone and stood up. I don't want to go home, but I can't guarantee what will happen to what I recorded on my phone just now. She said as she looked at Jiang Yan, hiding a knife in her smile. If I'm not mistaken, you should have mistaken her for Miss Su, right? If you insist on staying here, Miss Su may soon see this video on the big screen of the Century building in the city center, and then. Jiang Li, are you his mother crazy? Jiang Yan couldn't believe what he heard. Surprisingly, my own younger sister wants to put her rolled sheets video on the big screen in the city center. Even if Su Yinwan didn't see it in the end, his face would have been ruined throughout the entire capital. But looking at Jiang Li's unusually calm expression doesn't seem like he's speaking harshly. Jiang Yan was completely anxious and tried to grab his phone, but before he could react, his hand was twisted by the other person and forcefully folded back 90 degrees. Ah! It hurts, it hurts. Jiang Yan's tears were about to burst out. Are you going to murder my brother? This girl usually has to manipulate people to carry something for a long time. How come she has such great strength? Jiang Li's smooth and flowing movements are entirely instinctive. When she was in Daki, she had just learned how to walk when her grandfather, who was a general protecting the country, carried her on horseback. From then on, apart from studying and performing at home, she spent almost all her time in the school field. Ho Fujiang's family also has an ancestral marksmanship, and she has also learned it with great skill, no less than her brothers. Faced with Jiang Yan, who was empty and powerful, she naturally caught him with precision. Feeling the strength on his arm not decreasing but instead weighing, Jiang Yan screamed again, I was wrong. Can't I still be wrong? Do you really want to take off your brother's arm? Jiang Li finally let go of him with a cold snort. Qin Xiaoxiao, who was standing beside her, was already startled by Jiang Li, who had changed his face. At this moment, he was once again frightened by her fierce and coherent movements, so he simply shrunk to the corner of the bed and dared not move. Even Jiang Yan was in such pain. Fortunately she didn't provoke her just now, otherwise her arm would definitely not have been saved. Jiang Yan stood up with a twisted expression, and before he could catch his breath, he saw Jiang Li wiping his shoulder and walking outwards. He couldn't help but sneer at the figure behind him. Want him to submit? No way. However, Jiang Li suddenly stopped and the clear and distinguishable sound of a cold tone mixed with the noisy sound of the TV entered his ears. If you still consider yourself the eldest son of the Jiang family and my brother, don't just think about escaping. I will look down on you. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Grandma, lend me 2 yuan. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Is he shameless in Chapter 8? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is he shameless in Chapter 8? Jiang family. The anger that everyone had finally calmed down swept back 2 hours after Jiang Li left. Some of these people are relatives of the Jiang family. The Jiang family is silent and they are also difficult to leave. Some of them are from the Qiao family, and they won't leave easily even if they can't wait for an explanation. The rest are all those who watch the play across the shore, thinking about the farce between these two families today. They must see a result no matter what. So, although Lin Manru always tried her best to entertain guests according to Jiang Li's words, she still couldn't stop the speculations. Listening to the discussions of the people around her, Mrs. Chiao began to speak with a strange tone in her throat. Oh my, isn't Jiang Li confidently saying that he can retrieve Jiang Yan? It's been 2 hours now, why hasn't there been even a phone call? Originally, the reputation of your Jiang family outside was not good. One eldest son spent his days indulging in extravagance and alcohol, and eventually lost himself. The other eldest daughter, on the other hand, was not at all legitimate. If your Jiang family wants to handle this matter properly, they should bleed and let the big guy calm his anger. Lin Manru slowly tightened her hand as she held the teacup, and her face didn't just smile as she had at the beginning. She really wanted to refute something, but when she thought of Jiang Li's explanation before leaving, she managed to suppress her emotions. After venting, Mrs. Chiao was both angry and surprised to see that she had been ignoring her all along. When did Lady Jiang, the softest lady in the capital, become so tough? Just because that Jiang Li said a few words to her. Unwilling to accept it, she immediately pointed her spear at others and forcefully pulled the other wives to criticize the Jiang family. Qin Ma couldn't listen anymore. She took advantage of the dim sum and said, "Madam, are you really going to let Madam Chiao discredit our Jiang family like this? You may as well go and say something about it." Upon hearing this, Jiang Li, who had been standing silently beside him, snorted coldly, "What's the point of turning big things into small ones? Don't you see that the Chiao family doesn't even want to talk about things properly? In my opinion, we don't have to be afraid of them at all, we should be tough with them." Qin Ma was about to refute something, but a resolute female voice abruptly interrupted her words. "Uncle Jiang is right. For those who deliberately stir things up, we should not show any mercy." The originally restless crowd succeeded in calming down because of this sentence. Jiang Li, who was standing at the door, slowly walked to Lin Monru's side and comforted her by patting the back of her hand. Lin Monru's gripping heart finally relaxed. She seemed calm and composed, but in fact, her palm holding the teacup was already soaked in cold sweat. If it weren't for the last sentence Jiang Li said to her, the head of a wealthy family should have a calm mood and aura, maintain good landlord relationships, and be able to avoid being provoked by petty people's words, she would have been forced to faint by the Chiao family. Madame Chiao's face changed, and she lifted her sharp eyes to scan everyone before and after, before she angrily pinched her throat and said, "Oh, Miss Jiang has returned. Where's your brother? Why haven't you seen her? Didn't you just play tricks and say that you can definitely get your brother back? What about people? You probably want to use this clumsy method to procrastinate, right? Hey, I'm talking about that old lady." Suddenly, a male voice in the crowd echoed with anger, "If you don't want your eyes, you can donate. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes now. Do you think I'm air?" There was a commotion again, and then in the corner of the sofa behind them, they found the eldest son of the Jiang family, Jiang Yan, who was biting dim sum. The other person is leaning on the patent leather sofa, with a strong and arrogant posture, but unfortunately, that face can well highlight his extraordinary temperament. The peach blossom on the top carries a bright disdain in its eyes, but also carries a natural taste of abstinence. His eyebrows and eyes are as deep as carving, and every angle is exquisite and impeccable. If someone else is born handsome and charming, they often want to cover it up as much as possible, but he spreads this aura to the maximum, even to the point of almost being demonic. The only decent possibility is the formal suit he finally wore. At the moment of touching the man's face, Qiao Shuang, who was hiding behind her mother, blushed uncontrollably. The young master of the Jiang family is so good-looking, it's a pity. How could he become an unkempt and promiscuous young master? After seeing the person, Mrs. Chiao's eyes widened and her wide mouth didn't close for a long time. What's going on? Isn't it said that Jiang Yan is missing and his life or death is uncertain? Why did you come back in good condition now? However, before she could speak out in shock, Jiang Li walked up to her with a smile on his face. "Mrs. Chiao, don't worry about your surprise for now. I have brought the person back. Should you also fulfill your promise as agreed?" Mrs. Chiao's face turned completely white. Unconditional divorce. Isn't what she made today a joke? So she quickly took her daughter back a step, her eyes dribbling, and she said, You wouldn't have intentionally acted this fake drama to force us to unconditionally withdraw from our marriage, would you?" Jiang Yan's eyes flickered on the sofa. Divorce. Originally, Jiang Li asked him to come home to get married, not to force him to get married. Upon hearing this, Jiang Li's smile faded and he said, "So what Mrs. Chiao means is that she doesn't intend to keep the agreement. Mr. Jiang has already agreed on the marriage between Shuang and your brother. It was you who broke your promise first, but now you want us to abide by the agreement." Mrs. Chiao simply smashed the jar and brought Mr. Jiang out. Anyway, his elderly family can't come back now. Without him sitting in the Jiang family, it's just a pile of mud. It doesn't matter if she steps on it a few more times. Also, during the days when Jiang Yan went missing, she couldn't be sure where she was hugging other women. Amidst the clouds and mist, my daughter had a soft temper, so she kept suppressing her anger. But as a mother, I can't just stand by and watch like this. Jiang Li instantly caught the loophole in her words. Jiang Yan likes to play missing, which is something that everyone in the capital knows. Even the entire Jiang family cannot find his whereabouts. So how did Mrs. Chiao know about his specific behavior outside? The three of them became tigers. If Mrs. Chiao doesn't have evidence, please don't speak recklessly and ruin others' reputation. You. Mrs. Chiao was both angry and angry. What kind of character is Jiang Yan? Everyone can see it. Do you need me to spread rumors? Since you know he's not a good person, why did you agree to this marriage? Is it really for your daughter's sake or for some other purpose? Jiang Li saw blood for a moment, and Mrs. Chiao's anger instantly dissipated. Along with it, Jiang Yan beside him was dumbfounded. When did Jiang Li, who usually shouts and yells, become so calm and organized? Wait a minute. If you divorce, you will divorce. Why keep holding on to something that's not good and making a fuss about it? Is he shameless? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The Chiao family's business is not big, but they have a lot of courage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The Chiao family's business is not big, but they have a lot of courage. That's right, the Chiao family is not very good either. Since the morning, the whole family has been shouting and screaming without any manners. If you dislike the Jiang family for not being good, don't agree to this marriage. They have all said they can withdraw, but they are still unwilling. I have never seen someone so arrogant when they want to make a profit. Mrs. Jiang still has a general understanding and has been saying that she has been treating us with all her heart and effort. In my opinion, Miss Jiang is right. These Chiao family members have no intention of having a good conversation, they just came to suck blood. Listening to the criticism from the people around her, Mrs. Chiao's face was completely devoid of blood. Xiao Shuang's face couldn't hang up anymore, and she kept gripping her mother. Mom, isn't that the person you mentioned who will help us? Why hasn't there been any movement so far? Why don't you agree to leave? If you want me to marry Jiang Yan, you might as well let me die. You shut up, Mrs. Chiao scolded coldly. Not only is my daughter anxious, but she is also anxious. The person agreed that as long as they escalated the situation today, they would definitely hand over the handle of Jiang Yan to the people present, so that she could grab onto the Jiang family's braids and make demands to her heart's content. But she has been procrastinating until now. Why are everyone starting to blame them instead? The Chiao family didn't wait for what they wanted, but Jiang Li was different. Looking at the message sent by Xiang Hao on his phone, Jiang Li took another step forward and stared straight into Mrs. Chiao's eyes. Aunt Chiao, I respect you as an elder, which is why I want to resolve the matter between the two families calmly with you. But after all my good words, you refuse to cooperate, so don't blame me for being merciless. She threw her phone to Jiang Yan, who was still wandering outside the venue. Connect this to the big screen. Jiang Yan took his phone and walked straight towards the camera. He only realized it at the moment of successful connection. Why does he listen to Jiang Li so much? However, before he could express his grievances, he saw something on the big screen and instantly closed his mouth and lowered his face. The originally messy hall also seemed to have a pause pressed, and everyone was stunned in place. Xiao Shuang grabbed her mother's arm and shouted loudly. Because there was nothing else on the big screen, it was a photo of her and her ex-boyfriend kissing in the hallway next to the KTV restroom, as well as a video of them walking in and out of the hotel hand in hand. Mrs. Chiao is also dumbfounded. She was waiting for a scandal related to Jiang Yan, but how could it be that her daughter was exposed instead? Jiang Li walked calmly to the place where Jiang Yan had just sat and sat down. His movements of serving tea and sipping tea were seamless, exuding elegance and composure. Looking at Miss Chiao's reaction, she probably recognized herself as the person on the screen, right? Although you and Jiang Yan don't have much relationship, after all, you two have an engagement. I hope you can give everyone a correct explanation. Although Jiang Yan is not a good thing. He has been flirting with other women all day, causing one rumor after another. However, apart from being calculated by Qin Xiaoxiao, he ultimately did not leap into the thunder pit. But as for Qiao Shuang, she held on to her favorite boyfriend while also trying to profit from the Jiang family. She originally wanted the two families to get together and separate easily, but now it's clearly impossible. In her past life, Qiao Shuang had been unclear about her first love boyfriend since marrying into the Jiang family. In the end, the two of them colluded and caused the entire Jiang family to turn upside down. So she kept an eye out and asked Xiang Hao, who runs an entertainment venue at home, to investigate while on the bus. The result really revealed something. Everyone sighed and began to point fingers at Qiao Shuang. Madame Qiao couldn't hold her pride and slapped her daughter in the face. Didn't I ask you to cut ties with that guy? Why are you still entangled with him? It's okay now, you've ruined the face of the Qiao family. Qiao Shuang didn't expect things to develop like this, so she could only cover her face and run out of the door in embarrassment and anger. Stop me. Qiao Fu was not particularly popular and was about to catch up when suddenly several bodyguards in black suits appeared in front of him. Aunt Qiao, we haven't finished calculating this account yet. Why are you in a hurry? Jiang Li put down the teacup in his hand and a gentle smile appeared on his face again, but his beautiful eyes were cold. Now it seems that it was your daughter who disregarded the engagement and caused such a scene with this group of people at my house today. How do you think you should compensate for this loss? With no cards left, Xiao Fu had no popularity and could only take 2 steps back with a white face, pretending to be calm and saying, "Well, I'm not aware of this matter either. If it's not a big deal, I'll just drop out of this marriage." As she spoke, Mrs. Qiao gave a distressed look to the person she had brought with her. However, at this point, the Qiao family was already overwhelmed. The scandal lies with their daughter, how can they have the face to continue staying here? They could only find excuses to leave one after another. Seeing this, despite Mrs. Qiao's anger, there was nothing she could do. Jiang Li, what exactly do you want to do? Jiang Li sat on the sofa with an unchanged expression. Aunt Qiao, you have humiliated my mother and the Jiang family many times today. It's not too much to ask for an apology, is it? Mrs. Qiao clenched her fist. Do you want her to apologize to that soft persimmon Lin Monru in front of so many people? There's no door. But obviously, the guests present also had no intention of letting her go. Miss Jiang is already very kind to you, Mrs. Qiao, please follow the steps. Dare to give the young master of the Jiang family a green hat. The Qiao family doesn't have much business, but they have a lot of courage. I see, the Qiao family's reputation is the worst, and Miss Jiang's family is not as unreasonable or ignorant as rumored. Listening to these words, Mrs. Qiao couldn't calm down completely. Just now, she still had the confidence to challenge the Jiang family, but now that person can't be contacted and such a big scandal has occurred in her own family, where does she still have the arrogance? Although the Jiang family is not considered one of the top aristocratic families in the capital, at least it is also a prestigious family. She didn't need to cut off her own path. So she quickly ran to the side with a mournful face and grabbed Lin Monru's hand. Madam, I was dizzy before and said the wrong thing for a while. Don't take it amiss. I don't know about Frost either. It's all because this child is not up to it himself. Your adult doesn't remember any minor mistakes. Even if we can't be in-laws, we can still make friends and move around more in the future. Do you think so? However, Lin Monru changed her routine and directly pushed away Mrs. Qiao's hand. At this point, you don't have to pretend to be good. I can accept an apology, but there will be no possibility of communication between our two families from now on. Before, she was also dizzy, thinking that Xiao Shuang would be a good daughter. In law. But reality slapped her hard. She thought that a well-behaved and sensible person would disregard their engagement and engage in promiscuity with other men. This big family member surnamed Xiao was also pressuring their family step by step, and in the end, he completely exposed his ugliness. Li is right, they are simply a group of blood-sucking insects who will repay their kindness. Since it's for the good of the Jiang family, as the eldest lady, she shouldn't show them mercy anymore. Today is also a day of diligent updates. Requesting votes for feeding, end of this chapter. Chapter 10 is all about wiping your butt. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 is all about wiping your butt. Looking at Mrs. Chiao's shocked expression that couldn't be relieved for a long time, Lin Monru also tasted the sweetness brought by toughness for the first time, and then proudly handed her eyes to her daughter. Jiang Li nodded with a smile in his eyes, confirming Lin Monru's words and actions. It seems that her mother is quite proficient. That being the case, the matter becomes even easier to handle. With this in mind, she pulled out a document from her handbag and had the bodyguards deliver it directly to Mrs. Chiao. That's why she just returned to the Jiang family but didn't come in to show her cards in a timely manner. Since my mother has already said that, let's each return the dowry in dowry. Let's get together and part ways. That 500,000 cash would be considered as our Jiang family's poverty alleviation and philanthropy, but we should ask Mrs. Chiao to return the 10% of the Jiang group's shares. After all, our two families have already separated. If someone with a heart takes these shares as a bargaining chip for blackmail in the future, we will lose more than we gain. As soon as Jiang Li finished speaking, Lin Monru's back tingled. How did she forget that the Chiao family still holds the other 10% of the shares in the Jiang group? This was an agreement made between the old man and the Chiao family from the beginning, as a dowry for the two families to get married. A 10% stake is just enough for the Chiao family to receive dividends, but it doesn't allow them to interfere in the group's affairs. But if they agree to add another 5% of the shares, it will be different. Chiao's family, who owns 15% of the shares of Jiang Group, can have a say in the shareholder meeting. As Li said, if they want to continue using this as a threat in the future, it's just a matter of words. Her compromise almost caused big trouble for the Jiang family. Thinking of this, Lin Monru took a step forward and forcefully pushed the signing pen into Mrs. Chiao's hand. I was originally trying to make your family more respectable, but you didn't know how to do it yourself. If you refuse to sign this equity transfer contract, you won't be able to exit the Jiang family today. Mrs. Chiao had never seen the angry Lin Monru before, and her mind went blank in fear. She trembled and signed the contract. Lin Monru, who received the contract, directly asked the bodyguard to blow away the entire family surnamed Xiao. Jiang Li just got up from the sofa and slowly walked to the big screen. The crowd instinctively fell silent. Because in the confrontation with the Xiao family just now, they have already witnessed the tactics of Miss Jiang from the Jiang family. Within 2 hours, she retrieved her brother who had been missing for half a month, awakened her mother who had been weak and regretful, and let the impure Chiao family run into a wall before returning. How could it be the rumored uneducated and inexperienced spendthrift daughter who only knows how to chase men all day? However, to her surprise, the now transformed and elegant Miss Jiang family did not speak out to blame them for their spectator mentality today. Instead, she bowed slightly to them. I'm sorry for taking up everyone's whole day. It's not a normal thing for anyone to experience this situation today. We apologize for any inconvenience caused. Uncle Jiang, if you take someone to the wine cellar to fetch some wine and give it to everyone, it will be our Jiang family's apology. Jiang Yi immediately ordered a few people to leave, and everyone who reacted praised Jiang Li's handling style. Miss Jiang from the Jiang family is a person who can do big things, be flexible and flexible. Who has been saying that the Jiang family's style is not good, and that they have cultivated some crooked melons and cracked dates. I heard that Mr. Jiang likes to drink alcohol, and the wine cellar is filled with his beloved treasures. Miss Jiang of the Jiang family is too generous to give it away as she pleases. Let me see, today's incident is purely due to the Qiao family's lack of understanding. The Jiang family has already done their utmost in benevolence and righteousness. The guests received the fine wine one by one and left the Jiang family with a smile and thanks. Jiang Yan let out a gloating snort. I said, Jiang Li, don't be too happy too early. These wines are all my grandfather's treasures. How can you explain when he comes back? Lin Manru also walked over trembling. Yeah, Li, these wine masters are usually reluctant to give away. Would it be a bit of a waste of your talent if you do this? Jiang Li smiled. Mother, do you know why some families have been generous and reserved since ancient times, even though they are already wealthy and powerful? Lin Manru shook her head in confusion. It's for the sake of reputation, Jiang Li said. These two words may seem easy, but in reality, they often collapse in an instant due to small things. The Qiao family has been causing trouble like this today. Even if we don't make things difficult for them, their reputation in the capital will not be good in the future, and the corresponding path will be difficult to follow. And we have fulfilled our hospitality etiquette and brought our family's demeanor to the extreme. These guests naturally have a comparison in their hearts, and if there is any business dealings in the future, they will also think of the Jiang family's handling style today. Lin Manru was extremely surprised. When will her uneducated daughter be able to consistently articulate these great principles of managing families and even interpersonal relationships in business? These, even the old man has never ordered her. Yes, Li, you're right. Mom remembers. If this kind of thing happens again in the future, she can handle it herself. Shu, after watching a few episodes of the TV play, you really think you are the stay-at-home mother. Jiang Yan roast as she went to the table to pry open a bottle of wine and pour it down. Mom, her blind cat met a dead mouse, do you really think she is enlightened? She was praised by everyone for this day, but for herself. I mistakenly admitted to the wrong person and was even caught by my younger sister. That's okay, because 2 yuan was left behind by the number of people on the bus for half a day, and he bravely returned home. As a result, his fiancée AE publicly gave him a green hat. Although he didn't care about Xiao Shuang at all, he didn't even give her a straight eye, but the engagement was firm. Alright now, the whole capital probably knows that Jiang Xiao, who is impressive, was turned green by a woman at the engagement banquet. The more he thought, the angrier Jiang Yan lifted his hand and pulled open the collar of his clothes. Just as he was about to put down the wine bottle, a magnified face appeared in his sight. Seeing those eyes flickering with unclear emotions, Jiang Yan's mind instantly sounded an alarm. Jiang Li, what are you doing? Is what I said wrong? That's right, Jiang Li Wen said in a warm voice, but what I did today, including the wine I sent out, was all for wiping your butt. So, she took out her phone and displayed the payment interface in front of him. The 2 yuan I just took the bus, including the wine I sent out, added up to a total of 4.02 million yuan. Just transfer it directly to my account. Jiang Yan choked on his throat with a sip of wine. What? Jiang Li, are you wiping my ass? His mother. And everything that happened in the front hall was captured by the boy standing in the corner of the 5th floor. The boy's hand holding the railing had distinct joints, but it was so pale that even the veins inside could be traced. The face hidden in the shadow was also devoid of color, leaving only beautiful and somewhat distorted features. Like a swamp covered in layers of ice in winter, without any waves or ripples. Even if the spring breeze passes through, only broken ice edges remain. The boy stared motionless at the girl below, and finally a flickering light appeared in his dark eyes. She has changed a lot. End of this chapter.